Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is April, and this week I'm going to be making my cousin Harper her dream Princess Jasmine dress from the Aladdin live-action movie. Back in April, she was supposed to have an Aladdin-themed birthday party, but that never happened because of COVID. But I still wanted to make this costume for her, especially because Halloween is coming up anyways. So I hope you enjoy this video, and let's get started. Jasmine's pink dress with the long train is Harper's favorite, so I first drafted my bodice pattern and made adjustments to the design to fit a kid, and then created a sample for her to try on. Once everything is finalized, I can cut out all the pieces from some pink satin fabric and a couple pieces from a turquoise color fabric. I also cut out lining pieces. First, I interfaced all the bodice pieces before sewing them together. Then I sewed the top half of the bodice together first and followed with the second half. Next, I decided to sew the lining piece to the front bodice along the neckline. Then I base stitched the layers together along the sides so the bodice act as one. For the back bodice, I sewed the top pieces together along the cutout and along the neckline. Then sandwich and sew the top bodice piece in between the lower bodice and lining pieces. Now that both front and back pieces are lined, I sewed the bodice together at the shoulder and side seams. The last part of the bodice is the sleeves, and you'll want to sew the side closed and ease it into the armhole. Once the bodice is constructed, it's time to bring it to life with coins and gold trim. I purchased a whole roll of gold coins from the Trim Expo in LA and almost used up this whole roll on a kid's costume, so you'll probably need more than one roll to make an adult size. I'll link the name and website of where I got these coins down in my description box. Since I couldn't find any of this coin trim with a gold ribbon instead of black, I had to sew some on myself. I recommend getting the wired ribbon because it was able to bend easier when sewing curves, or just use an actual braided trim instead of a ribbon because those are definitely a lot more flexible. Now I can play around with where I want everything placed and what order to sew everything. The rest of the trim I bought is from Joann. I first sewed all the pieces that meet in the middle of the bodice and added a turquoise ribbon detail at the waist like how Jasmine has on her dress. And this is just a regular ribbon, but I manipulated the shape to taper on one side. For the curved shapes, I marked the guideline with a disappearing ink pen and then sewed the trim over it. It was hard to find what the back of her dress looked like online, so I left it for now, but you'll see what I did to it later. With a skinnier ribbon, I sewed 2 rows next to each other. Once the first layer of trims have been sewn on, I cover the raw edges in the middle with 2 rows of a thicker gold trim and also finish the edges of the bodice with a more decorative sequin trim. Also, notice the new addition of trim I added to the backside. I basically just copied the same design in the front. For the wide trims, I used a wide zigzag stitch, and for the narrow trims, I just sewed with a straight stitch. There's also trim around the armhole and around the bottom of the sleeve, which I hand sewed on later. Moving on to the skirt. I drafted an A-line skirt to fit Harper and created two sections at the bottom because it will be turquoise and gold. Originally, I was going to make this a two-piece costume and have the skirt attached in the front underneath the bodice since it opens up anyways. But I later changed my mind and decided on attaching it to the bodice and adding a zipper in the back of the dress. I wish I cut the skirt pieces on fold so there's no side seams, but I changed my mind too late. Cut out 4 gold and 4 turquoise pieces out as well, and interface all the pieces before sewing them together to give the skirt some body. Now that all 4 of my skirt panels are complete, I face them right sides together and sew down the side seams, leaving the center front and back open. I purchased additional fabric for the lining skirt and went ahead and sewed the lining to each side of the skirt, along the center front and bottom of the skirt. I think the most challenging part for me was figuring out the order of constructing this costume. The lining probably can be attached later, but in my head, I thought it would be easier to sew everything at once and just top stitch the trim through both layers. Once the 2 skirt pieces are pressed, I marked out the curved lines for the coin trim. First, I sewed the coins on the turquoise panel at the bottom of the skirt. Then I sewed a different gold trim down the center front of the skirt. Next, I followed the curved lines I marked and sewed the gold coins down by first sewing a straight stitch along one edge of the ribbon, and then sew down the other side of the ribbon. The top row of coins was the most difficult to sew because it was the most curved, and the ribbon started folding, but it still looked okay in the end. Once all the coins are sewn on, I attached it to the bodice. I did fit it on Harper first to get an idea of where to place the skirt, but basically it lined up with the center back and you just want to straighten it out to meet in the middle of the bodice. Since we can't just sew the skirt on straight across, I pinned it along the V-shaped bodice and sewed it from above following the V shape. Make sure to remove any coins that are in the way. Jasmine also has trim that go in between the coins, and instead of sewing it down, I wanted to see how well gluing would hold up, and it wasn't bad, but you do need to wait a while for it to dry. I also recommend E6000 glue instead of hot glue because it's super strong. Next is the step you never think about, sewing the zipper, which was a nightmare if you didn't already guess. I first sewed the center back of the dress closed, and even this was a pain because I already had all the coins sewed down, so I had to cut some away and remove them as I sewed because you don't want to break a needle, which I did one time. I suggest you leave the ends of the coin trim undone until you sew the zipper in, and then you can just tack them into place afterwards. For the zipper, I was going to hand sew, but some areas were so thick to push my needle through that I rather just use the power of my machine. I sewed the zipper in from above, which helped me see where the coins were, and I was able to move them out of the way. Just make sure that you have your zipper pinned in place. Thinking about it now, I think I could have just left the zipper seam open and sewed each side of the zipper tape in individually instead of trying to shove the whole dress underneath. Lastly, I bought some gems and glued them on the bodice, just like how Jasmine has on her dress. Underneath the dress, Jasmine wears some turquoise pants, and since they won't be seen too much, I just drafted a basic pair and will be adding an elastic waist. Of course, this dress wouldn't be complete without the long, beautiful cape, so with what's left of the pink fabric, I trimmed it down to about 30 inches wide to fit Harper, and the length of it was just whatever I had left to use. The train has a gold pattern printed all over it, so I'll be painting it on with a stencil I bought from Joann and gold fabric paint. To make sure the pattern is evenly spaced, I first marked out a grid all over the fabric, and we'll be painting rows of 3 and 4. I painted them out of order to give the first ones time to dry and then went back and filled in the space in between. This took extremely long, but was so worth it because look how gorgeous it is! Once the paint has all dried, I sewed a gold trim along the very edge of the train. I apologize for the out of focus here, I forgot to switch my setting from the painting scene. Next, I sewed a very yellow gold ribbon next to the gold trim, leaving just a little space of pink in the middle. After that, sew a bigger size light gold ribbon next to the yellow gold ribbon. And lastly, sew a turquoise ribbon next to the light gold ribbon. I sewed these ribbons and trims along 3 sides of the train and left the top of it empty. To attach the train on the dress, I sewed snap buttons on the shoulders of the bodice and at the corners of the train, making it super easy to take on and off. And to close up the back neck of the bodice, I sewed a hook and eye. Lastly, I created a crown for Harper by using a gold headband and gluing blue gems on it. And I'm finished. Here is the final dress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!